Hey everyone, tonight we are going to venture into the heart of one of the most harrowing survival stories I've ever lived, how I survived a bear attack deep in the wilderness. So before we get started, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can keep making better videos. Now enjoy a cup of hot tea and let's embark on this journey together tonight. I woke to the gentle hum of dawn filtering through my tent's mesh window, the air crisp with pine and dew. My pack lay neatly beside me, water bottle at the ready journal, tucked into its side pocket. This trip was meant to be a routine, solo reconnaissance, mapping seldom used game trails, gathering plant specimens, and collecting soil samples. I had trekked these woods countless times before. My journal entries, elegantly scrawled in ink, chronicled every step, every bird call, and stream crossing. Yet on this morning, a familiar comfort slipped into something deeper, a premonition I couldn't name. I unzipped the tent flap and stepped onto the damp forest floor. The smell of pine needles and loam filled my lungs as the rising sun painted shafts of gold through the tall spruces. I pulled on my boots and tightened the laces, feeling the reassuring click. The forest was waking. A chorus of sparrows twittered. A woodpecker tapped in the distance. My boots crunched softly on the undergrowth as I shouldered my pack and set off along a faint deer path, humming an old folk tune under my breath. By mid-morning, I arrived at a small clearing where I planned to sketch the pattern of bear tracks I'd spotted on yesterday's return. I crouched gently, brushing aside a handful of leaves to reveal the classic imprint, a heel pad followed by slender toes. They were fresh, the edges still crisp. My heart skipped. I knew bears ranged here, but I hadn't expected to get this close. I snapped photographs with my digital camera, then pulled out my compass to record bearings before crossing to the stream on the far side. The stream gurgled clear water rushing over smooth stones. I knelt, submerged my hands, and drank gratefully. My tongue burned with cold, but the jolt fortified me. I refilled my bottle and sat on a mossy bank to record observations in my journal. Tracks present. Must be cautious. No sign of cub's body size suggests a solitary adult. Proceed eastward wind from west. I hesitated, then closed the notebook, my pen resting between its pages. I rose and followed the deer path as it curved downhill, eager to reach a ravine rumored to hold rare wild orchids. The forest canopy thickened, light dimmed, and the underbrush scratched at my legs. I tightened my grip on my trekking poles, each step deliberate. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by the distant lap of water. I recalled all my training: never turn your back, on signs always leave an escape route. My instincts lit a cautionary flame. As I rounded a massive boulder, cloaked in ivy, the air shifted. The sweet, sour scent of musk drifted on a breeze. My chest tightened. I scanned the shadows, rifle and pepper spray strapped to my hip. My breath slowed, measured, every sense heightened. It was then, standing at the edge of that boulder, that I saw it, a huge dark shape, just beyond a thicket, half concealed by ferns. My pulse thundered. I froze, every muscle taut. Time slackened into icy beads of dread. I stared back at two amber eyes glinting beneath a glossy brow. The bear's massive shoulders rippled beneath thick fur, and I felt the weight of its gaze. It took a ponderous step forward, claws clicking softly on stone. In that instant, I realized how small I truly was. My heart pounded in my ears, each beat an urgent alarm. I swallowed, voice caught in my throat. The clearing, once so inviting in morning light, now felt like a stage for the unknown. I remembered the rule never run. Slow movements only. I slowly raised my hand open to show I wasn't holding anything threatening. My camera swung from my neck, and I gently leaned back, conceding ground inch by inch. Every fiber of my being screamed to flee, but I stayed rooted, relying on calm training. The bear sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. A low growl rumbled in its chest. My mind raced, potassium chloride tabs, bear spray ready. Yet I kept my demeanor still. Yet as I backed away, a twig snapped underfoot. The growl sharpened into a roar. The bear's ears pricked, nostrils flared, and then without warning, it charged. My chest went hollow. I dropped my pack, fumbled for spray. The world blurred into a whirlwind of thunderous pounding and snapping branches. My senses snapped alive the moment the air shifted. 1 second, I was cataloging plant specimens at the edge of the ravine. The next, the forest seemed to hold its breath. I froze, mid-note pencil, hovering above the paper in my journal. There was a soft, almost musical rustle, like silk dragged across gravel, coming from the dense thicket to my left. Then came the smell, a heavy sour musk that carried on the wind, acrid and unsettling. It reminded me of fermenting berries mixed with stale iron. My nostrils flared and I glanced skyward, trying to recalibrate the breeze direction, but the canopy above was too thick to tell. Every hair on my arms stood to attention. I set down my journal and slowly eased my pack off one shoulder, fingers brushing the cold metal of my bear spray canister. Training kicked in. Identify the threat, assess distance, and never turn your back. But even as my mind ran through memorized protocols, an icy prickle of dread snaked through my spine. There are moments in the wild when logic seems to drift downstream, leaving only raw instinct. This was one of them. The stream's gentle babble behind me faded into insignificance. My ears strained, searching for any hint of movement, a twig snapping underfoot, a heavy paw brushing moss. The rustle repeated closer this time, accompanied by a low crack like a knuckle of bone breaking the stalk of a fern. I held my breath. The scent grew stronger, almost metallic, as though the creature had walked through blood somewhere upstream. My heart caught in my throat, thudding a primal rhythm I could feel in my jaw. I raised a hand, not to brace or to ward off, but to still myself, slow movements only. Any sudden gesture could provoke. My hiking boots, laced tight, rested, planted on the damp soil, ready to pivot. I tilted my head, listening for vibrations in the earth. The ground beneath me felt subtly uneven, as though something massive had trudged past moments before. My pulse hammered in my temples. I could almost taste fear. In my training, instructors always emphasized reading the forest's language. The snap of a branch to the north meant something heavy. The crackle of leaves to the east meant caution. The low grumble of displaced earth underfoot meant danger. Now it all made sense. I whispered to myself, "Stay calm, assess, plan." But words felt hollow. The forest had become a stage set for an unseen actor. I reached slowly for my binoculars, flipping them open with deliberate care. Raising them to my eyes, I peered into the tangle of undergrowth. Shadows danced between greening ferns and knotted roots. At first, I saw nothing but the usual palette of browns and greens. Then a broad shoulder snagged in my vision for a heartbeat, barely more than a shimmer of dark against bark. I blinked and lost it. I lowered the binoculars and squinted. The odor intensified so thick I could almost see it as a haze curling through the mossy trunks. My nostrils burned. I realized then that the source was almost on top of me, just 20, maybe 15 yards away. No closer. I measured the distance with my gaze, the width of my extended arm. My skin prickled as adrenaline flooded my veins. I anchored my feet, pressing into the soil. Memories of bear safety lectures looped in my mind. Don't run. Speak calmly. Back away slowly. Make yourself large. I opened my mouth to speak, to utter a calm, low hum, anything to signal I was human and non-threatening. My throat clenched and only a rough whisper escaped. "Hey, bear." My voice seemed swallowed by the green cathedral around me. Silence answered, but for my own ragged breathing. I half turned, crouching, to make myself appear smaller, hoping to diffuse any perceived threat. My boot shifted against a rock, and I heard it the faintest scrape of claw against stone. My heart lurched. I blinked, and there it was, 2 amber orbs, pinpoints of intensity, drifting through the shadows. The bear emerged in slow motion, as though stepping through water. Its muzzle flecked with dark crust from some previous meal swung in my direction. I smelled the stench of decay on its breath. Muscles rippled under glossy fur, the color of mahogany stained by soil. It paused at the thicket's edge, head-tilting nostrils flaring. The sunlight slanting through gaps in the canopy caught in its eyes, turning them molten gold. I held perfectly still, reflexes warning that any twitch could unleash violence. The bear's head jerked, and it sniffed the air, a languid, almost bored gesture. Then its ears perked, swiveling like radar dishes as it focused on me. My throat tightened, saliva drying. I unclenched my fingers around the bear spray, careful not to fumble. My left hand hovered at my side, ready to draw the canister if it advanced. Time dilated, each second stretched into a chasm of tension. In that stillness, I felt closer to the animal than I ever had to any being, a massive force of nature, powerful yet vulnerable, encumbered by survival instincts as old as the earth. I found myself marveling at its presence, even as fear hammered through me. The rustle came again, this time from my right, another branch snapping underfoot. The bear's posture shifted. A low growl rumbled in its throat, subtle yet potent. I sensed it weighing its options, curiosity or confrontation. My chest tightened. If it chose the latter, I had precious little time to react. My mind flicked through every scenario I'd ever rehearsed. Shoot bear spray, back away, yell, make noise, but none felt certain. A gust of wind stirred the pines overhead, carrying away the scent that now bound us together. My eyes darted to the only escape route, a narrow corridor between two beech trees leading downslope to the creek. But to reach it, I would have to break the fragile truce of stillness. I swallowed muscles coiling and uncoiling like springs. Fear morphed into a razor-sharp focus. Everything else dropped away: the journal, the specimens, the bright world beyond that moment. All that mattered was that the bear and I existed in the same breath. The bear shifted its weight onto one massive paw, claws glinting. A low grunt rolled from its throat. I braced, inhaling the damp forest air. This was no longer a scouting mission. There were no photos to take, no notes to write, only survival. My ears pounded with the echo of my own heartbeat, each thump resonating through my skull like a war drum. The world narrowed to the sound of blood rushing past my eardrums. In that suspended moment, the forest around me, the swaying ferns, tilting grasses, distant bird calls, faded into a muted backdrop. All that existed was the bear, frozen like a statue, only yards away, and me trembling on the edge of panic and survival. I drew in a ragged breath, forcing myself to slow the rhythm. Instinct screamed to come, but every fiber of my training cautioned against it. Flashbulb memories of scouting lessons flooded my mind. Don't run. Never turn your back on a bear. Show your hands. Speak in low tones. Each directive felt precious, a lifeline in a sea of primal terror. I pressed my back against the rough bark of the beech tree roots, knotted around my boots. My fingers curled into fists at my sides, white-knuckled but steady. The bear shifted one massive shoulder, rising, then falling, and I sensed its fascination. It was sizing me up, calibrating whether I was threat or prey. Every muscle in its body quivered with raw power. I swallowed hard, willing my mouth to form words. A low hum trickled out, a barely audible attempt at calming the creature. Easy, easy. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, cracked thin. I forced the sound, steady, practiced. I'm not a threat. It was absurd. How could two simple sentences meaningfully communicate with a bear? Yet it was what I'd drilled over and over during countless wilderness workshops. My mind raced back to that day in the Ranger Station classroom. Ranger Torres had paced before us, bullet points on a whiteboard behind him. Assess distance, number body language. Avoid direct eye contact. Talk calmly. Back away slowly. He had demonstrated with a stuffed bear head, growling into a tape recorder, showing us proper posture. We had practiced in pairs, one playing the bear, the other the hiker. I'd laughed, then shaking my head, never imagining the absurdity would become my reality. Now, though, I needed that training. I needed it desperately. I lifted my left hand, open-palmed fingers, splayed to show I held nothing. The bear's head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring a guttural snort, escaping its throat. The sound vibrated in my chest. I froze, bracing against the tree. Don't stare, my inner voice hissed. I glanced toward the bear's shoulder, avoiding direct eye contact, but keeping it in my peripheral vision. Its shaggy fur bristled. It advanced half a step, claws sinking into the mossy earth. Each step released a muffled crunch. My knees felt rubbery. The ache in my injured side, from the initial sweep of its paw during the charge, throbbed like a burn. Blood seeped through my shirt, darkening the fabric. Pain tried to steal my focus, but adrenaline overrode it. I couldn't afford to lose concentration now. I remembered another rule: create distance without turning. I pivoted on my heel, sliding one foot back, then the other. My shoulders stayed squared to the bear. My gesture was subtle but deliberate. My journal fell from my pack in the scramble pages fluttering open on the forest floor. Part of me wanted to retrieve it, years of notes and memories spilled in trembling script, but practicality prevailed. I had to live. The bear's ears twitched, and it emitted a low growl that rumbled through the ground. My throat constricted, and I swallowed saliva thick and bitter. I could feel sweat beating at my hairline, despite the cool morning air. My vision tunneled slightly as the forest's green palette darkened around the edges, all focus narrowing to amber eyes and braided whiskers. Another memory surfaced, a story Ranger Torres told about a hiker who'd survived by making himself appear larger, raising arms overhead standing on a boulder. But I was pressed against the trunk of the tree. He wouldn't let me move far enough to climb, and besides, height wouldn't buy much if he decided to charge again. My breath steadied as I recalled breathing exercises taught in a wilderness first aid course. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Deliberate. I counted in my head, feeling the rhythm stitch some calm into my racing pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. Then the exhale, slower, 2 rounds. My vision sharpened marginally. I reconsidered my options. The only clear route was the narrow corridor leading downslope to the creek, perhaps a 15-foot sprint, not ideal against an angry bear, but if I could keep it moving behind me, maybe I could reach the water. I dropped my pack in the hope that the bear's interest would shift to the easier target. Its growl deepened. I crouched, bracing my hands on the tree's trunk. "Here we go," I whispered, though my voice threatened to break entirely. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then, as if triggered by my decision, the bear lunged. Time fractured. My training took over spray first. I yanked the canister free, thumb poised on the trigger. The bear covered half the distance instantly, jaws snarling, muzzle frothing. My vision blurred with fear and determination. I pressed the nozzle. A sharp hiss erupted as a cloud of orange mist sprayed across the narrow gap. The bear recoiled, head snapping back. It shook its massive head, blanketing the forest in a fiery gust of capsaicin-laced fog. My eyes stung. I stumbled backward, choking, as the spray drifted toward me. I pressed my free arm across my face, tears streaming. The world went white at the edges. When I blinked my eyes clear, the bear was reeling, pivoting to the side, coughing thunderously. It roared a sound like crumpling metal and backed away several yards, staggering. Each breath seemed an agony. I seized the moment. Gritting my teeth, I rose to full height, arms raised overhead, voice cracking but loud. "Go on. Leave me alone." My words rang hollow in the damp air, but I held ground. The bear rasped another sound, between a snort and a growl, then with surprising abruptness, wheeled and retreated into the thicket, its bulk disappearing behind ferns and fallen logs. My entire body sagged as the echo of its departure reverberated in my chest. Adrenaline crashed into exhaustion. My legs trembled. The roar of my heart fell away to a thunderous silence. I sank to the ground pack, forgotten at my feet, leaning back against the tree as if it were a lifeline. My throat rattled. My voice was gone. Mud from the path clung to my boots, casting them in a dark sheen. Blood soaked my side, a warm slick against my rib cage. I closed my eyes, head lolling, ear pressed against bark. I listened for its return, any branch crack, any grumble, but the only sounds were the far-off babble of the stream and my ragged breathing. Tremors shook my limbs, shock pure and unfiltered. My vision doubled at the edges. I forced my hands to unclip my pack, fishing for clean cloth to staunch the bleeding. My fingers fumbled slick with sweat and blood. I tore off a strip of shirt fabric and pressed it against the wound. Pain exploded white hot, but I held firm. Applying pressure, I glanced down at the blood-dark cloth. Each drop was a reminder of what I'd just survived. When my breathing finally steadied enough to think, I realized I was still facing the bear's direction, muscles tensed to spring. But there was nothing there now, only dappled light, slanting through branches, dancing on drifting dust motes. My ragged whisper escaped, "Thank you. Thank God." My ears still rang, but the thunder had receded. Courage, fragile and flickering, bloomed inside me. Every scouting lesson, every lecture, every tedious drill on bear avoidance had crystallized into survival. I was here alive, bruised and burning, but alive. I closed my eyes for a moment, pressing the cool bark to my forehead, letting the forest's heartbeat sync with mine. The path ahead was uncertain, and my wound demanded urgent attention. Yet in that silent communion, I understood fear, and training had danced together and saved my life. I pressed my back harder against the beech bark as the world rushed back in around me, the quake of adrenaline giving way to trembling limbs, the hush of the forest settling like dust. Every breath tasted of pine resin and copper. I yearned for daylight to brighten the scene, to fill shadows with warmth, but the canopy remained dense and golden shafts of sun seemed shy to break through. My hand still clutched the makeshift bandage at my side, and every shallow inhale hurt like a knife, twisting beneath my ribs. Summoning what remained of my strength, I eased myself to a kneeling stance. My legs shook so violently that I had to brace one knee on the mossy ground. I glanced over my shoulder. The thicket where the bear had disappeared was motionless, still as stone. Even the birds that once greeted dawn were silent, as if they too held their breath. My heart pounded a frantic tattoo, each thump echoing in my ears, begging me to move. My mind raced with questions. Was the bear really gone? Would it return? How far could I travel with this wound? Every hunting drill I'd ever practiced circled through my head: retreat to high ground, move slowly and diagonally, keep visual contact. But the terrain here offered little advantage. Rocky slopes sloped toward the creek, then climbed again into an even denser wall of firs. I slid my rifle free from its loop on my pack. No ammunition, only safety clicks echoed in the quiet. My studio had always insisted on photographing wildlife, never confronting it with lethal force. The rifle was merely for intimidation in dire emergencies. This was one of those emergencies. I shouldered it, fumbling with the strap its weight heavy and foreign now. I took a tentative step toward the creek, each movement measured, every muscle tensed. The ground felt unsteady, as though the forest itself might lurch if I stepped wrong. At the water's edge, smooth stones glistened, and the stream's gentle rush sounded almost too cheerful, a cruel counterpoint to the violence moments before. I scooped water into my cupped hands, rinsing the blood from my knuckles. The cold burn was fierce, but it stung life back into my numb fingertips. I scanned the opposite bank, a narrow ledge of rock that might offer a vantage point. My plan was simple: put distance between the bear and me, then use the high angle to assess my exit path. But I hadn't taken 3 careful steps before a rustle snapped me back. It was faint, so faint that I thought my mind tricked me. Then I saw them 2 amber pinpricks dancing between the trunks of 2 towering pines less than 20 feet away. My breath caught. My chest froze as if iced. I staggered backward, knee slipping on wet moss. My hand flew to my chest as if bracing a blow. The bear stood half hidden in the dim shadow's massive shoulder, half concealed by ferns, eyes locked directly on mine. They glowed like embers, fierce and unblinking, as though the animal could see every beat of my heart and hear the tremor in my voice. Time contracted. The world faded to the narrow tunnel of sight between my eyes and those burning orbs. I felt the press of fur against its powerful shoulders, muscles rippling with restrained energy. It smelled of damp earthfish and something metallic lingering from whatever scraps it had eaten before. The nostrils at the end of its broad muzzle flared, tasting the air between us. I remembered the first light of morning, how easy it had felt to wander these woods. Now the forest seemed transformed, alive and hungry, the shadows themselves pulsing with hidden life. The bear's gaze held me captive, a silent challenge that cut deeper than any claw could. I wondered if it recognized me as prey or merely as an interesting obstacle. Instinct tugged at me, every nerve screamed to run, but rationality held me fast. I focused on my breathing, drawing air deep into my belly, then exhaling in slow, controlled hisses. My hand hovered over my belt fingers, brushing the canister of spray. I dared not raise it unless absolutely necessary. One false move could shatter this fragile truce. The bear's ears twitched, turning toward a distant echo, perhaps a bird call or the scurry of small mammals in the underbrush. For a fleeting moment, its eyes flickered away from mine. I seized the chance, shifting my weight slightly, bending my knees to appear smaller, non-threatening. My shoulders sank as though I were offering a bow. I whispered into the silence, "I'm sorry, please." The words tasted foolish, but they felt necessary, an admission of my intrusion and a plea for mercy. The bear's head turned back and it inhaled, nostrils flaring like twin funnels. Its eyes narrowed to slits golden rods in a gloom of fur. Then unexpectedly, it exhaled a low, drawn-out huff that rattled the leaves overhead. I felt that breath wash over me, a chill that reached my marrow. It was neither aggression nor retreat, but something in between appraisal. The bear was weighing whether I was worth another attack or simply a curious interloper. I risked a slow blink. An animal blinked its camouflage-rawn eyes once, twice, then neither advanced nor retreated. The clearing grew silent again, unless you counted the muted lull of my own ragged breathing. I reminded myself of the precious minutes this standstill could buy me. If I could inch away to that rocky ledge and climb out of the direct line, perhaps I could make it to a ranger station 2 miles downstream. My analytical side flickered to life. I calculated bearing, slope angles, energy reserves. Everything hinged on speed and stealth. But the bear shifted slightly, stepping out from the cover of ferns. Its bulk filled more of my field of view, muscles coiling. I sensed it preparing to move, maybe toward me. The hairs on my neck prickled. I clenched my teeth, letting no tremor betray my fear. Slowly, I raised my hands overhead, palms turned skyward, a gesture I'd practiced countless times, but had never truly believed would matter. I murmured my voice, steadying Easy Bear. "You're free to go." My words felt like prayers. The bear flared its nostrils again, inhaling the plea. Then, as though concluding its assessment, it blinked once deliberately, then turned its massive rump toward me. My heart lurched with relief and newfound terror. I dared not exhale heavily, lest it interpret the motion as a deceptive move. Slowly, agonizingly slow, I lowered my arms, keeping my gaze trained on the back of its shoulder. My pulse thundered in my temples, but I forced one step backward, then another, each footfall deliberate, silent. The bear stood motionless until I had retreated nearly 10 yards. Then, without looking back, it pivoted again and melted into the underbrush. Only the faintest rustle marked its departure. I exhaled so softly, I barely noticed more of a prayer falling from clenched lips than a breath. Tears stung my eyes, not just from relief, but from the raw intensity of what I'd just endured. The forest exhaled too, birdsong timidly returned, and a breeze stirred the treetops. I dropped to the ground, survival instincts still thrumming, but relief wrapped around me like a blanket. I felt small, vulnerable, but alive, more alive than I'd ever felt. The weight of solitude settled in, but it carried a different shade. Now not loneliness, but kinship. With every living thing I shared this wild space, with even the bear. I gathered my pack, heart still hammering, and felt the first real tremor of exhaustion. My side throbbed fiercely, but pain was a distant echo compared to the sharp focus of still being here. I knew I needed to move quickly, to put distance between us, but I paused for a moment longer to imprint the scene, the golden eyes, the rustle of ferns, the hush that followed. The memory would sear itself into my mind, a testament to my will and the bear's unpredictable grace. Then I rose, knees creaking, and started down toward the creek, each step cautious but determined. My gaze kept flicking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the bear's silhouette. But the forest remained still save for drifting motes of pollen and a lone jay calling raucously overhead. I reached the creek's rocky ledge and climbed it, breathing easier as gravity drained my tense muscles. From this vantage, I could see the river winding through the valley, a silver thread beckoning me toward civilization. I slung my pack over one shoulder, pressing the bandage at my side, and exhaled at last a breath that carried both the terror of what nearly happened and the promise of survival yet to come. I pressed my back against the warm, rough bark of a towering fur chest, heaving as I fought to steady my breathing. Every muscle screamed relief that the bear had finally retreated, yet my mind remained caught in a jittery coil torn between primal instinct and hard-earned training. In that silent forest, my heartbeat felt amplified, each thump reverberating through the damp earth beneath my boots. The dual impulses warred in my head: run until my legs gave out, or cling to protocol until I could summon the self-control to stay calm. Instinct whispered that safety lay only in flight. My leg muscles twitched, ready to bolt, to put every last yard between me and that massive predator. I could already taste the cool water waiting 2 bends downriver. Imagine the ranger station beyond that. Imagine the hollow ache of exhaustion giving way to relief. But training a fragile mosaic of drills, lectures, and simulations insisted on caution. Don't run. Retreat slowly. Keep your eyes on the bear without staring. Speak in low tones. My throat still felt raw from yelling. I had to quiet the echo of that command to leave. My fingers brushed the pack at my hip where an emergency whistle hung. I'd rehearsed blasts of it to startle an attacker or draw attention. Now, though the forest was too still to risk any noise that might carry back to the bear's keen ears, I loosened my grip. A faint breeze rustled needles overhead, stirring a fragile lullaby that seemed almost mocking after the roar and huff of the bear's departure. I closed my eyes, inhaling the resinous air, and ran through the checklist engraved in my memory wound: stable but bleeding, stamina low but manageable, terrain uneven but discernible path, threat likely gone but unpredictable. The rational mind ticked its boxes, but the primal self, the one shaped by millennia of fight-or-flight instincts, throbbed impatiently, anticipating another charge, another spray of capsaicin, another brutal encounter. I measured the distance to the creek, roughly 100 yards. Not far, but enough for half a dozen heart-pounding moments if the bear decided to return. My training urged me to circle wide, weaving through thicker cover to avoid a direct line of sight. I scanned the slope, fallen logs, tangled roots, a fallen spruce trunk I could perch on for better vantage. A plan formed shaky but serviceable inch along the slope's edge, keep the creek below me. On my right, maintain visual contact with the tree line where the bear disappeared. Instinct rebelled at each step of this plan. My gut snarled, "Get out now." Yet every fiber of muscle remembered the countless what-if scenarios I'd run through. What if the bear chased? What if you lost sight? What if you stumbled? Protocol offered counter-arguments, slow and steady. Eye contact without a stare. Lure it away from your path. Live to finish the story. I checked the makeshift bandage at my side. The pressure was holding the rivulets of blood nowhere near as profuse as initially. The pain throbbed, certain to intensify with every misstep, but premeditated adrenaline dulled its edge. My boots found purchase on slippery moss as I lowered my body into a slow sidestep. My shoulders squared toward the tree line, though the bear was nowhere in sight. I hummed under my breath, another tactic taught to maintain calm, a low monotone note that disrupted the eerie silence. My fingers curled around the edge of my rifle's strap, a talisman rather than a weapon. Memories flickered of a time back home, cleaning that rifle in the garage, learning how to sight the weight of the barrel, comforting in my hands. Curiously, that domestic ritual had felt safe, then almost banal. Here in the shadowed woods, it felt like carrying a false promise. It could buy time, maybe ward off curiosity. It could not guarantee survival. Each breath I drew was a battle, the urge to inhale deeply and bolt versus the need for measured, deliberate breaths. I chose practice inhale, 4, hold 4, exhale, 6. I repeated the cycle, feeling the knot in my chest loosen by increments. The forest seemed to exhale alongside me, needles rattling overhead, the creek's gentle murmur rising in volume as I edged nearer. Suddenly, a crack sounded, wood splintering under weight, some 50 yards ahead. My heart stuttered. I tensed, swiveling my gaze to the sound. Could the bear have returned already? I leaned against the fir trunk, fingertips digging into rough bark, bracing for the worst. But instead of the low rumble of a giant growl, I heard the distant call of a mountain jay. Its sharp, chattering cry filled the quiet, startling in its normality. My shoulders sagged. Relief and residual terror warred for dominance. I pressed one hand to my chest, feeling the rapid rise and fall, then placed the other over the injury. Pain flared a vivid reminder that I'd been lucky, or maybe skilled, to emerge as I had. The world no longer seemed an arena for life or death, but rather a courtroom where instinct and training testified to my right to live. I took a cautious step away from the slope's edge, then another. The creek's glint of sunlight beckoned a promise of aid and eventual escape. Still, part of me hesitated, half afraid that moving too quickly would betray my presence. So I moved methodically, each footfall a deliberate test, solid ground, no loose debris, no hidden obstacles. I kept checking over my shoulder, though the tree line remained an impenetrable wall of trunks and underbrush. As my mind wandered between survival drills and raw instinct, I found myself whispering a mantra I hadn't realized I carried. Observe, respect, retreat. Words the ranger had painted in broad strokes during that workshop. That mantra felt strangely empowering now. Observe the bear, respect its power, retreat on your terms. My peripheral vision caught a shimmer of movement, sunlight glinting off a wet rock. I breathed another slow cycle and refocused on immediate concerns, bleeding contained, distance to creek shrinking, energy waning but sufficient. 4 more steps would put me at the water's edge. 4 more steps and I could tend to the wound, then figure out the path back to civilization. In that stretch of 4 steps, instinct and training finally seemed to merge. Instinct provided raw energy, and acute awareness training offered a path to harness that energy. I braced, gathered the last reserves, and lunged forward, sprinting the final yards in a blur of motion. My shallow run was awkward, each footfall jarring against the stone-strewn bank, but I made it. I collapsed to my knees, hands dipping into the creek's icy flow. Water splashed over my wound, pain spiking in a white-hot shock, but I welcomed it. It meant I was alive. I gulped in cool gulps, letting the stream's rush drown out the residual roar I still felt in my ears. Blinking, I propped myself on one hand and reached for my first aid kit, rattling it open. Training guided my actions as I wrapped the injury with antiseptic and fresh gauze, knotting it tight. Instinct sat back panting, watching letting science and preparation take the lead. When I finally sat back on a smooth rock, fatigue crashed over me. My trembling hands rested on thighs streaked with creek water. Instinct had driven me to fight or flight. Training had steered me through. Together, they had pulled me from the brink. I inhaled a deep, shuddering breath and let my eyes close for a moment, savoring the sensation of knowing I could survive even when every alarm in my body screamed the opposite. The moment my boots hit the frozen creek bed, the bear's mass slammed into my back like a freight train. There was no growl of warning this time, only sheer kinetic force as its shoulder drove into me, sending me sprawling across slick stones. Pain exploded in my side, where its claws raked my flank, hot and searing. My breath whooshed out in a gasp, chest collapsing against the cold water. Instinct screamed to curl into a ball, protect vital organs, but the bear's weight pinned me face down in the shallows. I thrust my arms against the muddy bottom, trying to scramble to my feet, but the bear's bulk shifted to press me down further. Its heavy fur rubbed over my neck, coarse and wet. Each breath it exhaled, hissing cold air across my skin. Panic surged. I felt its powerful muzzle graze my shoulder blade, and adrenaline snapped into a fierce clarity. If I stayed here, I'd be crushed. With a guttural roar, I slammed an elbow backward hard into the bear's massive ribcage. The wet thunk echoed absurdly loud in the narrow ravine. The animal recoiled, hoarse breath fogging the air, eyes blazing with startled anger. I seized the moment, curling into a crouch, water sluicing around my knees. Every muscle shook a tremor of fear and adrenaline. My ripped shirt clung to my side where fresh blood welled beneath the fabric. The bear's paws churned water claws, scraping stone as it lunged forward again, jaws snapping shut, inches from my elbow. I twisted, rolling to the side, and scrambled onto a moss-covered boulder. Pain lanced through my ribs, each movement a knife's edge. I slammed my back against the cold rock, yanked free, the bear spray canister from my belt, thumb poised on the trigger. My vision narrowed the world, contracting to the slick silver can and the charging monster. As the bear's charge narrowed the gap, I didn't hesitate. That bright orange mist erupted in a cone between us, a living barrier of burning heat. The bear slammed into it, mid-leap, eyes watering, mouth agape in confusion. It shook its head violently, claws scraping the stone ledge, fur steaming where the spray clung like fire. Tears blurred my vision as I staggered back, tripping over a root and falling hard onto my side. The bear stood at the creek's edge, stamping one paw, shaking off the lingering mist with a violent shudder. Its roar, a wet, guttural bellow, filled the air, reverberating through the canyon walls. My ears rang, the echo thrumming in my skull like a trapped insect. I pressed my hand to my temple, vision swimming. Somewhere in that haze, I heard the rush of water, the creaking limbs of pines overhead, but the bear's roar consumed everything. It lunged again, slower, this time still blinded, but driven by raw confusion and pain. My pack, kicked aside in my earlier scramble, lay half submerged. I knew if I could reach it, I might find a flare, maybe the emergency whistle, but instinct held me frozen. The bear's head whipped into view lower, jaw-dripping eyes narrowed. Its teeth snapped mere inches from my thigh. I forced my mind to run through protocols, back away slowly. No, it's blind with spray, retreats pointless. Make noise, yell. My throat was raw, no sound emerged. Retreat to cover. The only cover was the creek's opposite bank, a treacherous climb over slimy rocks. I shoved myself onto all fours, pivoted, and scrambled deeper into the creek water, spraying around me. The bear followed each step, crushing stones beneath enormous claws. I veered sharply to my left, toward a narrow fissure in the rock wall, just wide enough for me to squeeze through. Pain flared, but adrenaline surged. I thrust my shoulder into the crack, sliding sideways, scraping ribs against rough granite. My arm scraped blue-black against stone blood, mixing with river water. I pushed through until my legs swung free, then tumbled onto a tiny ledge no larger than a coffin. Water cascaded beside me, but the ledge offered a momentary sanctuary. I pressed my back to cool rock, gasping sweat and fear mingling on my skin. Behind me, the bear roared in frustration, paws raking the surface where I'd been. Its guttural rant echoed through the narrow gap. I forced myself to breathe inhale, 4, hold 4, exhale 6. My ribs protested each inhale, but I corralled the pain, making it a tool rather than a paralyzing force. I peered down at the creek, 30 feet below. It tumbled over rocks in a frothy cascade. The only exit from the fissure was back toward the riverbank, but the bear blocked that path. My mind raced. I needed to create distance again. Options were thin. The crack trended upward toward a jagged outcrop that might lead to a hidden slope. I inched forward, hands and knees navigating slick stone, every movement deliberate. The bear's weight shifted as it plunged a massive paw into the narrow opening claws scraping granite. I froze, hearing rock flake and slide under its strength. Instinct roared retreat, but backward meant dropping into the river. I twisted, pressing my hand against the opposite wall, levering my torso through the crevice until only my legs remained trapped. Then, with a surge of desperate strength, I yanked one leg free, pulling myself into a shallow alcove formed by eroded stone. The alcove was no larger than a standing coffin, but it was solid. I jammed my back against its curve and curled inward, balling my body to minimize space. For the first time since the attack began, raw fear gave way to cold calculation. I waited. Moments passed, measured by the drip of water from overhead. Then there was the sound of heavy breathing, wet labored just beyond the crack. The bear's snout appeared thrust into the fissure nostrils, flaring as it hunted me by scent. The air trembled with its exhalations. I pressed my face into my knees, arms hugging my legs, doing my best to reduce any sign of life. Seconds stretched into eternity. I felt its breath wash over me, cold and damp. Then I heard it inhale, deeply satisfied, perhaps that nothing remained. It withdrew. The stone wall shook as it pulled back, and then silence slammed into place. My heart pounded so loud I thought the bear might hear it and return, but it did not. Only the steady rush of the creek and the drip of condensation overhead filled the void. I remained curled, waiting until the roar of my heartbeat settled into a quieter drum. Pain claimed full attention, then so acute in my side that tears slipped down my face. I forced myself to uncurl body-aching hands, shaking. The alcove floor was slippery, but I found purchase on a raised ridge of stone and stood on knees, then hobbled upright, pressing my back against the rock face for support. The world beyond the crack looked different. Sunlight dimmed by my position, but still warm. I took a trembling step, then another, testing the alcove's floor. It held. I limped to the crack's mouth and peered out. The river gleamed below the forest beyond, serene, almost calm after the chaos of attack. No sign of the bear. I exhaled relief mingling with shock. My legs wobbled, and I sank to the ledge's edge, letting my feet hang over the water. The alcove had spared me, turned my fear into stillness. But I could not linger. With a determined breath, I rose, pressed my hand to my side to brace the wound, and edged back through the fissure into the creek. Every step down the boulder was agony, each twist of my torso sending fresh jolts through my ribs. But the bear's absence fueled me. I reached the creek's edge, splashed water on my face, and drank deep gulps. Water sluiced the spray's burn from my eyes, and the chill cut through the haze of pain. I limped away from the rock wall, leaning on my hiking poles, forging a path downstream where trees thinned and the bank rose. The forest's hush felt surreal, as though the world had paused to exhale. Every bird call sounded hopeful now, every rustle of leaves a hymn of survival. Instinct had saved me again, but it was training those endless drills, that bare safety lore that had guided my movements between panic and planning. I pressed on ribs, screaming determination, blazing I would survive this. The river would lead me toward help, and with each step, the bear's roar receded into memory, a testament to the balance between nature's fury and human resilience. The forest mists curled around my legs as I broke into a desperate run, adrenaline still stinging my veins even as pain lanced through my side with every stride. The rocky ledge I'd scrambled from dissolved behind me, replaced by a narrowing corridor of ancient pines whose gnarled trunks formed a natural, forbidding tunnel. My bootlaces were soaked and slippery, but I clenched my teeth and powered forward, mindful to keep my torso square to the fleeing path, never turning my back completely. A distant echo of cracking branches behind me told me the bear was unrelenting. Each breath cut sharp and shallow, but I forced myself to draw full lungs of cold, damp air. My ribs protested a burning ache that seemed eager to collapse my chest, but I willed my diaphragm to expand. I lengthened my stride, planting boots firmly on exposed roots, letting the pain become a companion rather than an impediment. Focus narrowed to the narrow ribbon of trail ahead and the rhythmic slap of my boots against leaf-strewn ground. The trees here were taller and closer together, their branches interlaced overhead like cathedral vaulting. Shafts of gray-green light filtered through, illuminating swirling motes of dust and pollen. Every so often, A low-hanging branch would swoop past my face, and I ducked instinctively, arms swinging wide to avoid it. My backpack bounced against my shoulders, each jolt reminding me of my vulnerability, but also of all the supplies still intact: water, bandages, enough food to keep me moving. A sudden surge of pain blossomed where the bear's claw had caught me hot and insistent. I stumbled, nearly pitching forward, but managed to catch myself against a ridge of rock jutting from the earth. Heaving once, I pressed a hand to the makeshift dressing and willed the world to steady. The cotton bandage had begun to slip, and I yanked a strap from my pack to reinforce it, wrapping the bloody fabric tighter. Blood seeped through the new layer, but the pressure eased the worst of the bleed. I refused to linger. The chase would only resume. With a muttered curse, I shoved the strap back into place, slung the pack, and darted past the smattering of ferns edging the trail. Underfoot, the terrain shifted from hard-packed soil to loose, pebbly scree. I slowed, calculating footfalls to avoid a misstep that could twist an ankle or collapse me. The slope tilted downward, drawing me toward a ravine where the creek's roar grew in volume. It was a gamble-easy access to water, and perhaps a route that skirted the bear's territory, but higher risk of misjudging footing. My instincts screamed to avoid the steep decline, but I needed that water's cover, that rush of sounds to hide my escape. I launched myself into the scree knees, flexing to absorb the uneven ground. Pebbles skittered out from underfoot, but I kept my momentum, letting gravity assist me. The forest canopy thinned, revealing ragged boulders, projecting like ancient sentinels over the ravine's edge. My vision tunneled greens and browns, bleeding into a blur until I forced it open, scanning for obstacles. A jutting rock catch point glinted under the spray of mist, and I aimed for it, banking my weight on careful foot placement. My side screamed in protest as I touched down, but I bounced off it and veered around a mossed boulder, stinging sweat and grime, stinging my eyes. A twig snapped sharply at my right heel, and I whipped my head back, half expecting the bear to emerge from the underbrush. But instead, a gray squirrel pelted away tiny claws, skittering across stone. I allowed myself a fraction of relief before pressing onward. The ravine's slope eased near the water's edge, a narrow ledge forming a precarious path along the gorge. I halted, chest heaving, to survey the span. The creek roared 20 feet below the water's white froth, striking rock like liquid thunder. Moss-covered stones lined the bank, some stable, some wobbly. My plan: hug the cliff wall, pick stable rocks, and move diagonally downstream until a gentler bank appeared. I exhaled slowly, as if running out air might trigger collapse, then dropped into a low crouch. Boots found purchase on a flat stone, then another each shift, sending vibration up through my ribs. My hands, trembling, brushed the rough granite face of the gorge, fingers probing for secure friction. Behind me, the forest's shadows pulsed with unseen life. I could almost sense the bear's presence, could almost feel the bear's bulk reflected in the darkness beyond the pines. I sped my progress, moving rock to rock with calculated urgency. Halfway along the ledge, the stone crumbled under my weight. My heart leapt as a chunk dislodged, tumbling into the creek with a thundering splash. I froze, breath caught in my throat, until the rippling echo faded. Then I reminded myself the bear would hear that too, but with any luck, the booming water noise would mask the sound. I risked a sideways glance into the forest. No flash of movement, no swirl of fur. I gritted my teeth and pressed forward. My legs burned. Each step seemed to demand more willpower than the last. The narrow ledge gave way to a scramble of boulders, and I used my hands to pull myself upward, boots sliding over slick granite. Sweat and water merged into slick sheen, but muscle memory kept me rooted. I heaved once-rooted fingers into a crevice, shimmying my body free of the ledge's narrow confines. Atop a flattened plateau, a small cedar grove offered cover. I dashed under its spindly branches, dropping low behind tangled roots. My chest heaved. Breath came in ragged gulps that shuddered my entire frame. The cyclone of pain in my side flared again, but I clasped one hand over my ribs and bent over as if I could hug the pain away. After several breaths, I straightened again, eyes scanning for the next route. The plateau sloped upward toward a thicker stand of firs, possibly a dry creek bed, cutting deeper into the hillside, offering a steeper but more concealed path. I decided on the dry bed it would muffle my footfalls and avoid an open run. I crept across the plateau, boots silent on duff and dead needles. My balance teetered, but I forced even distribution of weight, pivoting at the hip rather than twisting my torso. Behind me, the forest remained mute, no telltale sounds to confirm pursuit. Yet I felt as though the bear lurked just beyond perception, evaluating, planning its next move. Dropping into the dry bed, I let my poles and hands guide me down the loose earth. Small stones pattered into deeper hollows. I flattened each step. My side throbbed so intensely I could feel the pulse of my own blood. Light filtered unevenly through clumps of oak and maple, dappling the bed in shifting patches. I pressed onward, every shadow a potential threat, every shift in light morphing into the bear's looming shape in my fevered mind. The bed steepened, and I kept low, planting poles firm, then knees. A sudden gust swept through the ravine, carrying a swirl of leaves that danced like phantom spirits in the gray air. I paused, holding my breath, half convinced it signaled the bear's approach. When no massive form emerged, I eased forward each careful step, bribing more pain into my side. After what felt like an eternity, the dry bed began to ascend again, the terrain softening into a carpet of pine needles. I pushed to my feet, wincing as I straightened. The air here smelled sweeter, pine resin tinged with wildflowers. Ahead, the ravine opened into a dim clearing, scattered with aged stumps and sun-bleached logs. A gnarled stump, shaped like a throne, rose at its center rings deep as time itself. I sprinted across, sliding to a stop behind it, heart hammering. I dared to scan the perimeter, no towering shoulder, peeking through brush, no golden glint of eyes. I exhaled relief and residual fear mingling in my chest. My vision swam slightly, and I gripped the stump's ridged surface, silent thanks slipping through clenched teeth. The clearing felt like a false sanctuary, inviting but exposed. Yet it provided a moment to gather strength and decide my next move. Pain flamed as I lurched into the center of the clearing, retrieving my water bottle. I knelt, unscrewed the cap, and drank greedily, water cooling my parched throat. Then I splashed water over my bandage, again retightening cloth. Each twist of the strap demanded more grit, but I refused to relent. If the bear re-emerged, I would be ready. Seizing the moment, I surveyed exits, a narrow trail leading uphill towards steeper ground, or a faint path veering into denser timber on the left. The uphill route promised better vantage but slower travel. The timber route deeper concealment, but more twigs and potential sound traps. The bear's unpredictability weighed on my choice. I opted for the left path. Deep cover meant fewer open clashes. I rose, shouldered my pack, and ventured into the understory. The forest here smelled of earth and decay, a raw aroma that reeked of life's cycles. My boots sank into loam cushioned by fallen leaves. I slowed to the hush of my own footfalls, letting instinct guide each placement. Behind me, the clearing's openness faded, and with it, the echo of scarcity. I felt part of the woods again, not a hunted interloper, but a cautious participant. Pain flickered, but no longer consumed me. The blend of will and training had hardened me into motion. Every nerve remained alert to shift in wind or brush. The bear could still be there somewhere, but I was no longer running blindly. I was on my terms, retreating, yes, but with purpose and calculated intent. And with that purpose driving me, I vanished into the ancient pines, determined to find safety beyond fear's reach. My legs trembled as I limped downstream, each step dragging through damp mud and wet leaves. The creek's burble rose and fell like breath, guiding me onward away from the bear's domain. Pale sunlight filtered through the high canopy, dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Pain rolled with every footfall, a constant reminder of my fragility and of the strength it took just to move. I excavated my canteen, the cool metal pressing against my palm. I sipped slowly, letting the water soothe my parched throat. In the rivulet's soft light, I examined the fresh bandage at my side. It held, though soaked and frayed, its red stain deepening where the cut had settled. I paused, crouched by the bank, and tore a clean strip from my spare shirt to reinforce it. The stitches of cotton felt coarse against raw skin, but necessity outweighed comfort. Once my dressing felt secure, I rose and pressed on, heading for the faint footpath barely visible through low brush. My map had marked an old ranger trail paralleling this creek, worn by years of hoofprints and hikers' boots. If I could find it, I could follow it to a service road, and beyond that to people. The thought sustained me, friendly voices, first aid kits, warmth, and shelter. As I staggered through a stand of hemlocks, the ground beneath my boots shifted from loam to gravel. My breath caught as the path sharpened. Before me, an embankment rising on one side, descending to the creek on the other. I recognized it, the ranger trail. Relief washed through me so fiercely that I leaned against a tree, eyes closed, savoring the moment. Survival had been won and lost countless times by paths in the wild. Today, it had steered me true. I followed the trail uphill, each step labored but unerringly steady. The air grew cooler as elevation climbed, carrying the tang of cedar and wet stone. Sunlight began to wane behind western ridges, and I realized the hour had slipped past midday. My pack, once heavy, now felt empty water supplies, low snacks eaten in panicked haste, but the promise of help drew me onward more effectively than any gear. The slope leveled into a gentle shelf where the forest thinned, revealing a battered wooden signpost. Its faded letters read Service Road, 2 mi. My pulse jumped. 2 miles. At my pace, more than an hour, but each footfall registered as progress. I exhaled slowly, releasing tension I hadn't noticed I'd been holding. The world felt solid again, trail underfoot trees, above creek far below. I pressed onward, keeping my shoulders squared and pace deliberate. Shadows lengthened and a golden glow filtered through fir branches. The forest became quieter, as if settling into evening. I paused at a fork. One path led higher into a grove of aspens. The other continued along a sandstone ridge. My map's scratchy note had indicated the ridge route, and I chose it favoring clear sightlines over concealed cover. In daylight, being visible to rescuers mattered more than hiding from bears. Each step along the ridge was a negotiation between safety and exposure. Loose rocks skittered underfoot, and I pivoted carefully using my poles to gauge stability. My ribs flared with every twist, but I breathed through each movement, counting in cycles to keep from panicking. Ahead, the forest sloped downward into a narrow valley where a mud-slicked road glinted in the late sun. I broke into a limp run, heedless of appearance. The road was faint, 2 tire tracks and dark soil, overgrown at the edges, but unmistakable. I reached it heart pounding and leaned against a spruce trunk to steady myself. The road led west toward a high meadow. Beyond that, a dirt service road connected to the main park entrance. I dusted off a path in my memory of earlier maps and set off. At the meadow's edge, low grasses swayed in a soft breeze. The road widened to a ribbon of packed earth. I followed it as it curved around a rocky knoll, then plunged into denser pines. With each step, the forest's menace receded, replaced by the promise of human presence. My mind drifted to the ranger station, warmth, antiseptic smells, bandages, voices. Suddenly through the trees, I spotted movement, a cloud of dust kicking up behind a slow-moving vehicle. A ranger's pickup, its paint faded by sun, and time rumbled along the service road. I waved frantically, voice hoarse but audible. "Hey, help over here." The truck slowed, tires crunching, engine throbbing. As it drew near the ranger, a tall figure in uniform leaned from the open window, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" he called, voice echoing. I could only nod, then collapse toward him, pain overwhelming as I staggered forward. He vaulted from the cab, catching me as I went limp. I felt the solid press of his jacket around me, smelled pine and leather. His calm authority steadied me. "Let's get you out of these woods," he said, voice gentle. "You're safe now." Strong hands guided me to the truck bed. I lay on a foam mat retrieved from the back limbs, shaking, but relief suffusing my mind. The ranger climbed in, securing me gently, then climbed behind the wheel. The engine rumbled back to life. As we rolled down the road, the forest slid past in a blur of green and gold. My side burned where the wound had been, but a warm sensation of rescue flooded my veins. The bear's roar had faded with each passing mile, replaced by the steady hum of tires on dirt. I caught the ranger's eye in the rearview mirror, managing a weak smile. He nodded, understanding without words. Ahead lay healing safety community and the chance to live another day. The wild had tested me, but human kindness pulled me home. The forest was eerily silent as the bear retreated, but I knew better than to trust that stillness. My legs quivered on raw nerve ends, and each breath jarred my injured side, yet I forced myself upright. The creek's gentle murmur beckoned me, water to clean my wound and steady my racing pulse. Still clutching my trekking poles, I limped toward its bank, every step a negotiation between pain and necessity. At the water's edge, I knelt and dipped my hands into the icy current, cradling the flow against my skin. The cold burned as it sluiced across bruised ribs and torn fabric, but the shock jolted me into sharper focus. I pressed my jacket aside and peeled back the makeshift bandage, wincing as fresh blood welled from the jagged cut. Using a strip torn from my shirt, I rewrapped the wound, knotting it firmly, and then overlaying it with the last sterile gauze from my first aid kit. Technique mattered more than speed. Each wrap needed to cushion and compress without cutting off circulation. The bear spray canister hissed faintly in my pack pocket, a reminder that lethal force had been my last resort. I felt a pang of guilt, but also gratitude for having been prepared. Training had taught me that survival sometimes demands hard choices. I inhaled the sharp, resinous scent of the forest pine needles, damp earth, distant moss, and for a moment allowed calm to seep into my bones. Surveying my surroundings, I realized I was still within the bear's core territory. My original exit path lay downstream, but the chase had carried me uphill. Now the creek trailed beyond a thicket that opened onto a game trail I recognized. If I could reach that trail, it would lead back toward the ranger station. It was a long shot, several miles, and my body protested the very thought, but staying put invited new danger. I rose, settling my pack into place and planted one pole ahead of the other. The world tilted with each movement, but setting a purposeful pace kept dizziness at bay. Underbrush tugged at my sleeves as I threaded between ferns, the dark green fronds parting reluctantly. My ears strained for any sign of the bear's return, a crack of a branch, a low snuffle, but only squirrels scurried away in alarm. I exhaled in relief, though heartbeats still thundered. Reaching the familiar game trail, I marked it by brushing aside a painted blaze on a tree trunk half-faded red. I followed the faint, eagle-etched groove in the dirt, leaning on my poles to steady my weight. Sunlight filtered through shifting canopy above spotlighting patches of lichen and the occasional wildflower, a reminder that life here thrived in cycles far older than my own. Pain in my side was a steady drum, but I translated each rhythmic jab into proof of life. Breathing through it, I used deliberate inhalations, expand ribs, hold, then exhale slowly. This cadence anchored me in the moment, kept panic from surging back. Birdsong flitted overhead, warblers, chickadees, encouragement from the forest's quieter denizens. I pictured their tiny hearts beating as fiercely as mine, small lives eking out an existence alongside larger threats. That perspective humbled me, and I felt a kinship with every creature that refused to give in. After what felt like an eternity, the trail narrowed further, branching into a steeper incline. My map had warned of a rocky embankment here, but also noted a ridgeline beyond offering a view of the service road. That was my next objective. I steeled myself and began the climb, gripping jagged stones and tree roots as if they were handholds on a sheer cliff. My poles slid in my other hand, ready to probe each foothold. Halfway up, nausea welled at the back of my throat, likely shock and blood loss. I paused, head bowed, hand against a granite slab. Teeth clenched, I forced a sip of water from my canteen and counted 10 slow heartbeats before moving again. Each step felt monumental, each breath precious. At last, the forest thinned, and I emerged onto the ridgeline. Beneath me stretched a ribbon of asphalt, part of the maintenance road I'd hoped to find. A solitary mile marker glinted in the late afternoon sun. Mile 4. My pace slowed to a painful hobble as I dropped poles and grasped its concrete base. Relief and exhaustion wove together into a dizzying rush. I lifted my phone, no signal, of course not, but the service road promised cell coverage just a bit farther along. With one arm pressed to my side and the other wrapped around the marker, I braced for the final stretch. I would not risk another encounter. I would stay to the open road where vehicles and rescuers moved. Turning my gaze along the asphalt, I spotted a glimmer of motion, a pair of hikers approaching in the distance, perhaps 300 yards away. Their bright jackets stood out against the gray ribbon and surrounding pines. Summoning the last of my strength, I raised one hand and called out hoarsely, "Help, please." Their pace quickened at the sound. One dropped a pack strap and broke into a run toward me, the other calling on a whistle. My voice cracked as I tried to shout again, but my words were lost in the wind. The hiker reached me first, a young woman with concerned eyes. "I saw your signal," she said, kneeling beside me. "I'm a park volunteer. Medical team is a mile down. You're going to be fine." As she pressed a fresh dressing to my side and applied gentle pressure, her partner used a cell phone to coordinate our location. I let my head rest against the mile marker, eyes closing in gratitude. The bear's roar, the spray's sting, the rush of fight all receded into memory. What remained was the pulse of human kindness and the promise of safety. I whispered into the fading light, "Thank you for coming." The volunteer smiled, voice calm. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." Hope surged through me, and I realized that surviving the attack was only half the journey. Finding help, accepting support, and carrying forward the lesson that preparation and compassion can turn even the darkest moments toward the light. I woke to a low humming in my bones, as though the very forest had turned into a living drum. My vision came hazy, mottled green and gold as sunlight filtered through the canopy. Every nerve in my body trembled from the sting of my wound to the residual thunder of the bear's final roar. The air felt alive, pulsing around me with the aftershocks of violence. I lay on my side, eyelids fluttering, forehead pressed to damp earth. My ribs protested with every breath, but I forced myself to inhale slowly, chest expanding despite the dull roar of pain. Around me, the forest was unnaturally still. Even the creek's usual chatter seemed muted, as though the trees themselves held their breath in solidarity. In that silence, the echoes of the bear's fury lingered like ghosts of thunder, deep reverberations that had shaken the ground beneath me. I could still feel them in the soles of my boots, in the fibers of my clothing, in the pulse of my veins. It was a reminder that the wild's power was far greater than any one life. My head swam with memories, the bear's colossal shape barreling toward me, the hiss of pepper spray cutting through the roar, the final lurch of its retreat. I sat up slowly, every movement a negotiation with pain. Branches overhead clattered as a breeze passed, and I wondered if the wind itself carried my heartbeat into the forest's veins. I placed a hand on the soil, letting its cool firmness ground me. The world spun less violently now, but the tremor underfoot reminded me that I'd been changed. I reached for my pack, dragging it close enough to lean against. The straps felt slick under my fingers, but I willed my body to unclip the first aid kit. I extracted a fresh compress and antiseptic, carefully peeling back my jacket to expose the jagged tear along my side. The skin there was mottled purple and red, the initial bandage damp with old blood. Freshly cleaned, the wound still oozed a slow reminder of my narrow escape. I dabbed, gently pressing antiseptic into the ragged edges, inhaling its sharp scent. Pain flared white hot, and I clenched my teeth, counting each throb as a promise to keep fighting. Once the wound was dressed anew, I pressed a hand to my side and pushed myself to stand. The forest beneath me swayed slightly, my knees weak, but the trembling was easier to control than the day before. I unshouldered my pack and checked the radio. One blinking bar of signal remained. I keyed the mic evac status A, crackled reply ETA 5 minutes. Relief washed through me, a warmth to counter the residual chill in my bones. I turned to survey the clearing where the battle had ended. Fallen ferns lay flattened, and sunlight illuminated broken branches as if spotlighting a stage of conflict. At the periphery, the underbrush quivered from last night's tremors. I walked the perimeter, boots sinking into soft earth, and traced a path back to where I'd confronted the bear. There, I saw the imprint of massive paws, half filled with dirt and leaf litter. In the center, a smear of capsaicin residue glowed faintly orange in the light. Even now, I could sense the fury that had once coiled there. Despite the gravity of that memory, I found a strange comfort in the echoes. They were proof that I had faced the storm and lived. My heart thundered again, but this time with a livelier rhythm, evidence of resilience. I closed my eyes, letting the forest's breath settle around me, the quiet drip of dew from needles, the distant burble of creek water, the soft rustle of leaves overhead. In that lull, I felt something shift, a turning point from pure survival to healing. I gathered driftwood and arranged a small pile of kindling. My pack held a single waterproof lighter. Fingertips stiff, I struck it until a sparking flame caught the dry tinder. The fire blossomed in golden tongues, casting warming light across the clearing. I hobbled closer and sank onto a fallen log firelight, dancing across my drawn features. Each flicker seemed to ease the tremor in my limbs. I tore a piece of jerky from my pack, one small snack ration remaining, and chewed slowly, relishing the salty flavor on my parched tongue. As twilight deepened, a chill seeped into the clearing. I stoked the fire with small branches, watching embers whirl skyward. My mind drifted to the echo of that roar, less a threat, now more a testament to the wild's raw authenticity. It had shown no malice beyond instinct, no cruelty beyond necessity. In its fury, it had reminded me how fragile life could be and how fierce the will to survive. My chest tightened as I thought of the rescuers on their way. The echoing tremors underfoot were slowly fading as night creatures reclaimed the soundscape. Frogs began their soft chorus, and crickets joined in a gentle symphony. I closed my eyes listening and felt the forest's heartbeat align with mine. Where once the echo had roared now, it drifted beneath a tapestry of life's quieter rhythms. I pressed a hand over my radio and called softly, "This is Harper. Signal still here. I'm stable." The reply crackled back with reassurance. "Hold tight. We're close." I nodded to myself, lowering the mic. The fire's warmth seeped into my bones, and the wound at my side throbbed with dull insistence. But pain had become a guide, not an enemy, a reminder of the fight I had endured and the life I still held. Night deepened to velvet around the flickering fire. Stars peered through gaps in the treetops, tiny pinpricks of silver against the dark. I lay back on the log firelight, flickering on my closed eyelids, and allowed exhaustion to wash over me. The echo of the roar no longer frightened me. It was part of my story, woven into the fabric of my survival. In that moment, I made a silent vow to carry the echo's lesson forward, to respect the wild's power, to prepare for the unexpected, and to honor the resilience that emerges when fear and training collide. The forest whispered its agreement, a soft lullaby of rustling leaves, and as the final embers of fire glowed and the echoes finally settled into silence, I drifted toward a well-earned rest, comforted by the knowledge that I had faced the forest's roar and come through it alive. I staggered along the service road's dusty shoulder, collapsing against a weathered pine to steady my wobbling legs. My side pulsed beneath fresh bandages, each heartbeat a muffled drum reminding me of how close I'd come to death. As dusk deepened, headlights appeared in the distance, tiny beacons of mechanical hope glinting between tree trunks. My heart lurched. Was it a ranger's truck or just a late hiker? I pressed my back to the rough bark, breathing in ragged gasps, and lifted an arm, waving it feebly. The headlights slithered closer, revealing an old 4x4 creeping along the curve. On its tailgate sat a red cross emblem, illuminated by a stenciled white square. Relief undulated through me like warm waves. My vision blurred as the truck ground to a halt and its passenger door swung open. A narrow cone of floodlight lanced the road. A voice called Harper. "Can you hear us?" I croaked. "Here," and managed a thumbs up before collapsing into a crouch. A ranger in a green uniform and reflective vest hopped down boots, crunching on gravel. She knelt beside me, her flashlight steady in one hand and a radio in the other. "You look worse for wear," she said with gentle understatement, placing a steadying hand on my shoulder. "I'm Ranger Cole, medical team's 5 minutes out. How are you feeling?" My breath tremored as I replied, "Alive. Hurt, but alive." She extracted sterile gloves from her belt pouch and inspected my side. The burning sting of antiseptic wipes made me wince, but I steadied myself against the pine. She pressed fresh gauze and elastic wrap, winding it firmly, then covered it with an extra plastic barrier to keep it dry during transport. "That should hold," she said, patting the bandage. Medics en route in the ATV. I tried to rise, but my legs betrayed me, folding under the weight of exhaustion. Ranger Cole caught me, sliding an arm under my elbow to support me. "Let's get you off this road," she murmured, signaling to a second ranger who appeared at the truck's rear. Between them, they guided me to the open tailgate, where a padded stretcher lay ready. I sank onto it gratefully, every rib protesting, but the steady movement soothed my jittery nerves. The ATV's engine thrummed as it approached lights, bobbing through the pines until it halted beside the truck. A medic jumped off her face, illuminated by a headlamp. "Harper Evans?" she asked, voice warm and efficient. I managed a nod. She checked my IV line in a portable cooler, already primed with fluids, and began preparing a mild sedative to calm shock. My head spun, and I welcomed the blur of chemicals as she injected it into my arm. The next moments passed in a soft haze. Hands guided me from the tailgate onto the ATV's rear cargo bed, secured by padded straps. The medic reached for my radio handset and keyed it. "Base, we have patient stabilized, preparing to transport." I closed my eyes, letting their voices and practiced motions anchor me. My fingers traced the grooves in the wooden floorboard beneath me, the cold seeping through even as warmth radiated from the blankets they draped over my legs. The ATV lurched forward, tires crunching pine needles as we bounced down the service road. Moonlight strung silver threads across the asphalt. Ranger Cole rode beside me, her presence steady like the earth itself. "You're safe now," she said, voice a gentle hum against the night's chorus of frogs and crickets. "We've got you." A flare of pain shot through my side as we navigated a sharp bend. I inhaled, holding it for a count, then exhaled into numb acceptance. The medic adjusted my IV drip, and the staccato click of dials became a lullaby. Somewhere up ahead, an all-terrain ambulance waited. We arrived at a small clearing lit by floodlights, where a camouflaged ATV ambulance stood ready. Paramedics in crisp white jackets guided me through the hatch and into the cabin's warmth. I lay back on a cushioned cot, the medic prodding gently at my wound. She smiled reassuringly. "Just need to get you to the main station for stitches and observation." The ambulance's engine rumbled to life, and we pulled onto a wider gravel access road. The night air rushed past the windows, carrying the scents of pine and distant campfires. I traced the condensation forming on the glass, letting the steady motion lull me. As the ride continued, my mind settled into a reflective calm. The roar of the bear, the spray of capsaicin, the frantic fight they all felt like distant storms. Now I floated in a gentle current of care and competence, surrounded by lights and instruments instead of trees and claws. Experience had seared one truth into my core. Even amid nature's fury, human compassion could blaze brighter than any wild roar. Moments later, the ambulance slowed to a stop at the main ranger station parking area. Lights glowed inside the rustic building, voices drifting out. Paramedics slid open the cabin door and eased me onto a wheeled stretcher. I felt lighter, buoyed by the certainty of safety. Inside the station's makeshift triage room, nurses whisked me onto a hospital bed. Warm blankets cocooned me, and a soft chorus of monitoring beeps filled the air. A doctor approached, reviewing my chart and tracing a gloved finger along my bandaged side. "We'll need to stitch this properly and get you some antibiotics," she said kindly. "You'll be sore, but you'll recover." I managed a tired smile. "Thank you, all of you," I whispered. My voice was a rasp, but it carried heartfelt gratitude. As the sedative's edge crept back in, I closed my eyes, comforted by the steady beat of the heart monitor. Above me, a single bulb shone in the quiet room, a beacon of care after the bear's savage wilderness. And in that moment, I realized that help, fragile and distant, had become my saving candle, its light guiding me from the brink of survival into the embrace of human kindness. The dawn light filtered through the blinds of my hospital room as I lay propped against crisp white sheets, my body still humming with ache and gratitude. The bare-side scar beneath my ribs throbbed with faint reminders of yesterday's battle, but beyond the physical pain, deeper truths resonated through my bones. Survival had taught me lessons far beyond any classroom or drill a curriculum written in sweat blood and the raw pulse of the wild. First and foremost was humility. Before the attack, I had believed in my mastery, the years of scouting the survival workshops, the countless checklists memorized by rote. Yet, in that forest clearing facing a creature 5 times my size, I discovered how small I truly was. No amount of knowledge could erase the bear's primal force or nature's indifference. It was a reminder that respect for the wild must stem from understanding our own limitations. Humility meant acknowledging that no human creation rifle spray or pole could fully equal the raw power of instinct. Closely entwined with humility was respect. I'd always admired wildlife from a distance, but the attack forced me to regard the bear not as villain, but as fellow being driven by need and territory. Its roars weren't cries of malice, but declarations of survival. That nuance reframed my relationship with nature. It wasn't an adversary to conquer, but a domain to honor. I realized that every rustle of leaves, every track in the mud, was a language demanding attentive listening. Preparation emerged as another cornerstone lesson. In the hospital's antiseptic quiet, I traced scars on my thighs and ribs, knowing each could have ended me if I'd lacked proper gear or first aid know-how. Bear spray, a reinforced bandage, a charged radio, each item had been more than equipment. It was a lifeline. Yet preparation wasn't mere accumulation of tools. It was the mental rehearsal of scenarios I'd once considered unlikely. That mental map of what-ifs proved invaluable when logic and training collided with raw fear. Resilience proved itself in the trembling of my legs as I hobbled toward help. True resilience is not the absence of pain, but the capacity to endure it, to translate suffering into forward motion. Each agonizing step along the creek, each breath gasped against shredded ribs, was a testament to human tenacity. In that crucible of fear, I learned that resilience is forged in adversity, and it grows in the space where mind and body refuse surrender. Impermanence was a stark, unbidden tutor. In moments I believed were my last pinned beneath the bear's massive weight, or rolling in the cold current, I glimpsed how fragile life can be. The forest's shadows and light shift in seconds. Allies can become threats. Recognizing impermanence means valuing every heartbeat as fleeting treasure not taken for granted. In the hush after the bear's retreat, I felt an urgent clarity. Life's currency is measured in moments, and each deserves full presence. Trust surfaced as both frail and indispensable. Early on, I hesitated to rely on strangers. After all, this was survival of the fittest. Yet when the ranger's lights broke through dusk, when medics treated me gently, trust became my bridge from solitude to safety. Trust in training, trust in equipment, trust in the kindness of others, all of it wove together into my rescue. That lesson extended beyond the forest. No one truly survives alone. Connected to trust was community. Weeks of solo scouting had fueled my independence, but the bear attack revealed that real teamwork, those who checked in, those who answered calls for help, those who risked their own safety, was life's essential tether. I resolved as I lay in that cot that I would share these lessons, to teach scouts, to write articles, to mentor hikers. Community ensures that hard-earned wisdom is passed on so others may live. Adaptability was another carved truth. The attack's chaos rendered plans obsolete. My intended leisurely route vanished in the bear's fury. I had to pivot spray. Instead of bag photos, shallow sprint, instead of steady mapping. In wilderness and in life, adaptability means shedding rigid expectations and embracing the fluidity of circumstance. A prepared mind adapts, a fixed mind falters. Patience and timing proved their worth. During the standoff, I learned that sometimes action demands restraint, that measured breathing can outlast the burst of panic. Knowing when to speak, when to move, when to hold ground, all relied on timing practiced long before. In the hospital morning light, I felt that patience, honed in the forest, would enrich every future endeavor, projects, relationships, creative work. Finally, the lesson of gratitude settled in my chest. Gratitude for training that guided me, for instincts that sharpened me, for tools that defended me, and for rescuers who saved me. Gratitude for the bear itself, a force that tested the boundaries of my will and taught me how fiercely life insists on being lived. Every scar, every bruise was a badge of lessons I'd carry long after my bones knitted and flesh healed. As the nurse entered to change my dressing, I summoned the strength to sit up straighter. My reflection in the window showed a face lined with weariness, but eyes bright with understanding. Survival had offered me a rare gift, not just another chance at life, but clarity on what makes life worth fighting for. Lessons etched into body and soul would guide me whenever I ventured back into the green cathedral of forests. And when I finally walk among those ancient pines again, I will tread with humility, respect, and gratitude, bearing the echo of survival's roar, not as a burden, but as a covenant to live fully, wisely, and in harmony with the wild's enduring wisdom. The following morning's light filtered through the hospital blinds, but in my dreams I was back at the shattered campsite, torn canvas, scattered gear, and the haunting imprint of paws in the mud. In reality, I awoke to the muted hum of machines and the soft pad of nurses' footsteps. My ribs ached with each breath, but the ache served as a tether to the day before proof that I had survived. I lay still for a moment, summoning the clarity that dawn brings, and allowed my mind to traverse the boundary between safe walls and those wild woods. Memories surfaced in jagged flashes. My makeshift shelter ripped open sleeping bag, damp with dew. The bear's colossal form emerging from the underbrush at first light. The primal roar that shattered morning calm. I remembered the way the forest went silent just before the charge, as though every living thing recoiled in anticipation. My heart pounded in my chest, pumping blood and life through wounds that had nearly claimed me. I reached gently for the IV line and traced its path, grateful for its steadfast drip of saline that kept me anchored in safety. Drowsiness tugged at my lids, but I pushed it aside. Nurses bustled in, checking vitals and adjusting dressings, their practiced efficiency a stark contrast to the chaotic scramble in the creek bed. I watched them move with gentle urgency, offering water, adjusting pillows, whispering reassurance. Beyond my window, the morning sun cast long, warm shafts of light across the tiled floor, transforming sterile walls into a glowing haven. For the first time since the attack, I felt the full weight of gratitude settle in my chest. My thoughts shifted to that campsite. I pictured returning there, stepping across that clearing where wildflowers now nodded in the breeze, the stream's burble as constant as time itself. I imagined kneeling beside the flattened earth, running fingers through the twisted fibers of my tent's torn nylon, surveying the trampled ferns and broken branches. In that stillness, I would find echoes of what had transpired, claw marks on a tree trunk where I'd braced myself, scuffed stones where I'd slid patches of trampled moss where I'd fought for every breath. But beyond the physical scars, I envisioned a deeper reflection. The campsite, once a symbol of solitude and preparation, had become ground zero for life's starkest test. I recalled laying there, body aching, waiting for the moment to rise and fight once more. That decision to stand and defend myself rather than flee heedlessly had marked a point of no return. In the hospital's soft light, I recognized that reflection was both a balm and a danger. A balm to integrate lessons learned, a danger to become lost in what could have been a final moment. I gathered strength and swung my legs over the bedside feet, brushing against the plush carpet. My entire torso protested, but I rose with determination. A tray of breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and a small fruit cup waited on a wheeled table. I stood beside it, hand pressed to my side, and allowed a nurse to help guide me as I took tentative bites. Each taste was vivid, the salty tang of eggs, the sweet burst of melon. Flavor had felt distant yesterday. Today it anchored me in reality. After breakfast, I asked for a blank notebook and pen. The attending doctor smiled. "Write if you can," she said. "Processing helps recovery." I accepted the notebook, its crisp pages promising order amid chaos. I jotted the date, June 19th, 2025. Beneath it, I wrote a single line, aftermath and reflection. And then I paused, pen hovering, absorbing the moment's weight. I recalled reflecting by the creek, staring at the water's dance, and wondering at life's fragile flow. Now, in this calm room, I began to trace that flow in ink, the shudder of my heart when I first saw the bear, the hiss of spray against wet air, the thunder in my bones as I fought for one more breath. I wrote in fragments, images, and feelings and hard-earned truths, knowing that this reflection was part of healing. Nurses entered periodically, checking wound dressings and offering sips of water. With each interruption, I noted a new detail, how the sun's angle at dawn had painted golden halos around birch trunks, how the forest floor's scent peat and pine had filled my lungs, how the rush of water had offered both refuge and threat. In weaving these notes, I found perspective. The aftermath wasn't merely the physical sight, but the collision of instinct and resolve that defined every moment. Mid-morning, the doctor returned to remove my remaining sutures. I lay back as she snipped and lifted each stitch, the sting brief but clean. Beneath pale pink skin crisscrossed with fresh cuts, stared up at me like a roadmap of survival. I flexed gently, feeling the resilience threaded into my flesh. Healed well, the doctor said, inspecting her work. Keep protecting it for another week. I nodded, gratitude shining in my eyes. Later, when visitors came, family and friends, warmth and laughter filled the room, yet beneath each greeting lay an undercurrent of shared relief. They asked about the campsite, the bear, the rescue. I answered with honesty and care, weaving reflection into every sentence. At one point, my mother reached across and squeezed my hand. "Your story will save others," she whispered. I realized then that aftermath and reflection extended beyond myself. They formed a bridge for anyone who ventured into the wild. By late afternoon, I closed the notebook pages, filled with raw reflection and budding insight. I placed it on the bedside table. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the room. I lay back, breathing steadily, feeling the echo of that campsite merge with the comfort of these walls. The aftermath was no longer a moment of vulnerability, but a threshold to resilience, an invitation to carry the story forward. And in that quiet, reflective space, hospital room transformed into sanctuary. I understood that the truest victory wasn't driving the bear away, but integrating every scar and memory into a deeper understanding of life's fragility and strength. The campsite's echoes would reverberate in my mind forever, but now they would guide me with wisdom rather than fear. I settled into the stillness of the hospital room, sunlight pooling across the floor like warm water, and let my mind drift back to those first chaotic moments in the forest. The lessons of that bear attack were etched into me now, not just as scars on my side, but as fundamental truths woven into my sinew and psyche. Survival had taught me more than how to deploy spray or brace against a charging mass. It had revealed the raw architecture of resilience and the deep harmony between human and wilderness. First, I learned that preparation must extend beyond equipment into mental frameworks. I had carried bear spray, a charged radio, a first aid kit, but the real lifeline was the mental map of what-ifs I'd rehearsed. In the moment of impact, my mind had shifted from panic to protocol: identify a threat, secure, spray, maintain orientation. That mental groundwork hours spent visualizing worst-case scenarios had proved indispensable. I realized that preparation is less about stockpiling gear and more about forging flexible, battle-tested plans in the theater of the mind. Second, I discovered that instinct and training are not opposites, but partners in the dance of survival. My instincts had sounded the alarm hair on end, nostrils flaring, but it was training that transformed that raw terror into measured action. The rhythm of slow breaths, the calibrated stance, the precise spray bursts each move was a callback to drills practiced under calm skies. In that crucible of fear, instinct provided speed, training provided accuracy. Together, they created a synergy that transcended either alone. Third, the attack underscored the fragility and power of the human body. My ribs, bruised and torn, had throbbed with every breath, reminding me of vulnerability. Yet each painful inhale also confirmed my survival proof that my body, though battered, was still alive and mobilized. I learned to listen to pain not as a foe, but as a guide signaling both damage and capacity. Pain told me where to brace, where to move carefully, where to trust the strength still pulsing beneath torn flesh. Fourth, I came to respect the forest's quiet pedagogy. Before this, I had admired nature, from a remove photographs, journal entries, scanned footprints. Facing the bear up close revealed a living, breathing ecosystem where every rustle and scent carried meaning. The forest's sounds, the creek's lullaby, the wind's murmur, had provided cover and context for every action. I learned that true wilderness wisdom lies in attunement, reading the language of leaf and bird call, anticipating shifts in light and scent, trusting the subtle warnings woven into the world's fabric. Fifth, the attack taught me the paradox of presence and surrender. I surrendered to necessity, dropping the pack, yielding ground during the standoff, but remained fully present in each moment, alert to the bear's every breath and movement. Survival demanded both a willingness to let go of predetermined plans and an unwavering focus on the current breath, the current threat. Presence amplified awareness. Surrender unlocked adaptability. Sixth, I grasped the essence of courage as a deliberate choice rather than absence of fear. Every time I raised my hand, every time I squeezed the spray canister, fear roared in my chest. Yet courage was the act of moving forward, despite that fear. It was a choice repeated in microseconds. Maintain stance, step back, slowly, apply pressure to the wound, call for help. In each choice, I affirmed will over panic. Courage, I learned, is forged in the incremental confrontations of dread and resolve. Seventh, I internalized the lesson of interdependence. My rescue had depended on rangers and medics, their readiness, expertise, and willingness to risk rugged terrain to find me. I had once prized solitude in the wilderness. Now I recognized how crucial human networks are in survival. Camaraderie, communication protocols, emergency check-ins, all underscored that even lone journeys rely on communal support. Interdependence wasn't weakness. It was an acknowledgement that survival is often a shared endeavor. Eighth, I discovered that simplicity often outperforms complexity in crisis. The makeshift bandage, the driftwood barrier improvised from bare essentials, had protected me when specialized tools were unavailable. In the hospital, intricate equipment hastened healing, yet on the trail, raw items served best. I realized that elegant complexity has its place in comfort. In crisis, the simplest reliable measures often prevail. A strip of shirt cloth, a breath taken slowly, a twig fashioned into a barrier, these became symbols of primal resourcefulness. Ninth, the attack illuminated the power of narrative in healing. From the moment the radio crackled confirmation to the final stitches of my hospital sutures, I framed each event as part of a story of survival I would tell others. That narrative arc gave structure to trauma, transforming chaos into a sequence of lessons. Recounting the tale to medics and loved ones stitched clarity into memory. Narrative, I understood, is more than recollection. It is a tool for integration, connecting past ordeal to future purpose. 10th, I learned that vulnerability can be a source of strength. Admitting fear, asking for help, admitting pain. These acts let me access resources beyond my solitary capacity. In the hospital room, I lay cradled by kindness, treated without judgment. Vulnerability became a bridge to compassion and care. I resolved to carry that lesson forward, to embrace openness not as weakness, but as an avenue to deeper connection. 11th, I recognized that survival instills a heightened appreciation for life's everyday moments. In the hospital cafeteria, I savored the first sip of coffee I could taste. In the corridor, I marveled at sunlight dancing through leaves outside the window. Each small pleasure felt magnified, a reminder that existence itself is precious. The bear's roar had threatened to erase all future moments. Surviving had painted them in vivid relief. Finally, I understood that these lessons are not final endpoints, but living threads to be woven into every future path. The forest, the bear, the hospital, they had been teachers in different guises. I had emerged with a tapestry of insights, preparation, humility, presence, interdependence, and the transformative power of story. These truths would guide each step, each breath, whether on trail, in boardroom, or at home. I closed my eyes, feeling the steady throb of life beneath my fingertips, and whispered a silent vow to carry the forest's lessons wherever I walked. The bear's roar had faded, but its echo persisted in the sinews of my being, a resonant call to live fully, wisely, and in reverence of the wild's endless curriculum. I braced myself against the foot of a towering cedar, its rough bark a familiar comfort after days of battling through pain and fear. The forest around me breathed with morning light rays, filtering through fern fronds and casting gentle patterns on the leaf-strewn floor. My side still throbbed with reminders of the bear's claws, each heartbeat a muted echo of past violence. Yet in that moment, I felt something new stirring beneath the ache, a profound awareness of how fragility and resilience weave together into the fabric of life. I drew a slow breath, tasting pine and dew, and reflected on the journey that had carried me here from first sign of those telltale tracks to the final retreat of the bear's form into shadow. Each step had carried risk and revelation. The moment I froze at its gaze, the charge that sent me sprawling, the spray that burned its senses, and the desperate climb along rocky ledges. I had been small against a creature 5 times my weight, and yet somehow I had harnessed every reserve of will and training to stand my ground. Now, leaning against the cedar's steadfast strength, I realized that my own body mirrored the forest's duality. I was both vulnerable, bruised ribs, torn fabric, raw nerves, and unbowed a vessel of determination and learned skill. The lines between human and wild, felt to blur the forest, had tested me as fiercely as any storm, and I had emerged alive, carrying its lessons etched into flesh and spirit. A gentle breeze stirred overhead, carrying with it the soft chorus of distant birdsong. I closed my eyes, letting the melody seep into my bones. It felt like an invitation to renewal, a whispered promise that after every trial, like shifts toward healing. I felt my shoulders loosen as gratitude replaced lingering tension. I had been afraid, injured, and tested, but never defeated. Slowly, I unshouldered my pack and sat on a moss-covered root. My gaze drifted to the trail I would follow back to civilization, winding through ancient pines like a ribbon of possibility. With each inhale, I absorbed the serenity of the clearing. With every exhale, I released wisps of fear and fatigue. The forest no longer loomed as a threat, but embraced me as a survivor, its rhythms aligned with my own return to steadiness. I ran a hand over my journal's leather cover, recalling entries scrawled in trembling script, heart-pounding spotted tracks. Spray canister ready, pain sharpened, but will unbroken. In that ledger of survival, I saw not just records of fear, but a testament to how resilience blossoms when we face our limits. I opened to a blank page and wrote 3 words: fragility and resilience. The act of writing felt ceremonial, a final dedication to the wild's curriculum and my own unfolding story. I closed the journal and pressed its cover to my chest, feeling the weight of memory and the lightness of survival coexisting there. Sunlight warmed my face as I stood testing my feet on the soft earth. Each step forward felt deliberate, honoring the path that had nearly ended and the hope that still guided me. The cedar's roots gave way to ferns, and ferns to the winding trail. I lifted my gaze to the sky, where morning clouds drifted like gentle guardians, and felt a calm determination settle in my heart. In that quiet aftermath, I understood the deepest truth of survival, that fragility is not weakness, but the threshold where resilience is born. It is our vulnerability that demands connection to training, to instinct, to community, and our resilience that transforms trial into growth. Carrying this intertwined wisdom, I ventured onto the trail, each step a testament to life's enduring capacity to renew itself. The forest's hush deepened as I followed the winding trail toward warmth and help. Twilight's golden hues caressed the trees, painting every leaf in gentle light. My steps felt lighter now, each one a soft echo of the journey's trials. The pain in my side had softened to a dull heartbeat, an intimate reminder of how closely life and fear intertwine. I paused beside a quiet brook, the water's lullaby mingling with my slowed breathing. Moonlight shimmered on its surface, a silver path guiding me onward. In that luminous stillness, I felt fear's edge soften into wonder. The same woods that had tested my limits now welcomed me back, as if acknowledging the courage that had carried me through. I found a fallen log to rest its mossy surface, cool beneath my palms. Leaning back, I gazed upward at the vast canopy where stars peeked through emerald leaves. Their faint glimmer felt like distant promises of healing, of renewal of the sunrise that always follows night. The forest exhaled around me, a soft rustle of needles, a gentle sigh of wind, a melody of crickets awakening. With the eyes half closed, I let gratitude fill each breath. Gratitude for every helping hand, every lesson that honed my instincts, every heartbeat that persevered. In the quiet that followed survival's roar, I discovered a new rhythm, one of gentle resilience, where fragility becomes the conduit for strength and solitude unfolds into harmony. I rose, brushing fern fronds from my sleeves, and set my gaze on the distant glow of the ranger station. Each step forward felt like a promise, kept to live fully wisely and in reverence of the wild's enduring wisdom. The forest's whispers of renewal drifted behind me, companions on a path that from this moment onward would always be guided by the intertwined grace of fragility and resilience.